It's now my pleasure to introduce Rich Pell. Rich Pell is a professor at the School of Art, and he's going to talk about his catalog of postnatural organisms. Rich is the founder of the Center for PostNatural History. I hope you've all had a chance to come to it. It's a major attraction in Pittsburgh. It's the Museum of Genetically Modified Life, and probably the only one like it in the world. He's collaborated with engineer Jamie Schulte to develop a searchable relational database of living organisms that have been altered by humans through selective breeding or genetic engineering.
All right, thanks so much to the studio and the FRFAF for making this all possible. It's sort of quite a bit in progress at this point, but as Golan mentioned, I run this museum called the Center for PostNatural History, and it's kind of a museum of life forms that have been shaped by human culture through breeding, genetic engineering, this sort of thing. Kind of from the get-go, I've been really interested in how one goes about visualizing these changes in terms of like the tree of life. Kind of the wonderful thing about this particular metaphor is we've got a good 150 years of kind of thinking about it as how to place living things onto this tree. But it gets a little wonky when we consider taking genes from one part of the tree and sticking them into another, which is what you do with genetic engineering. You're sort of like taking branches and kind of duct taping them together, creating new organisms, new possibilities. And I've been wanting to visualize that using a real database of the evolutionary connections between living things to visualize the new tree, the one that we're making, the one that we're over in the Mellon Institute or any number of buildings on campus. We're contributing new branches to this tree. So over the years, I've kind of tried to visualize this in a lot of different ways graphically. It even kind of eventually became like our logo, this very kind of distilled version of it. But I've always wanted to do it programmatically, like in code, dynamically, something that could happen on the web. In part so that our museum could have a presence out there in the world, beyond Pittsburgh, beyond these kind of physical exhibits. So for example, that goat that you saw on the first slide, that's kind of a particular goat. That goat makes spider silk in its milk, or at least it did when it was alive. She's a genetically modified goat. She has a gene from an orb spider that's been added to her genome. It expresses in her mammary gland. So you milk the goat, and you can harvest spider silk from that milk. So this is kind of an example of just like a tiny little tree. It only has two leaves. One has the goat on it, one has an orb spider. Our program generated this earlier. We could also generate a larger tree that just has pretty much all of the different species that get used in laboratories. So we're not looking at any wild organisms here. It's just the kind of the domesticated fruit flies and mice and even human beings. And we get to see their kind of common ancestry in the tree of life. This is just a screenshot from like this week, still very much in like its state of becoming. But the idea here is to create this tree dynamically, for it to be kind of forever changing and kind of loosey-goosey and fluid, a little bit unpredictable, which is kind of more in keeping with life, in my opinion. And also to share like many, many different organisms within this so that it can exist on an iPad or a website as a catalog of postnatural organisms. So stay tuned, maybe I'll come back next year with something more.